The house is filled with remains of others in every room except for the bathroom. I didn't know any of them. I've given some of them names. I feel comfortable with them, and I only hope that they feel comfortable with me. I like the fact that others are present in my house. I have someone to talk to. As I walk through the room, I can say, "And oh, did you hear that?" Or something I read in the newspaper. I can call out as if it was to someone I knew, something that I saw in the newspaper that I would like someone else to share with someone else. And that's why I have them. I feel happy that they have come to live here and stay with me. I don't know where else they would be. Underground, hidden away. People are not comfortable with death. And I'm not quite sure why, because it's something that's going to happen to all of us. It's something that's going to happen to me. And I'd like to sort of know about it and think about it and share some of that while I'm still alive. And the best way for me to do it is to be reminded of it, and that's why there are the coffins, that's why there are the skeletons, that's why the bones are in every room. In other cultures, other than the one that I find myself in living here and the one we are in, Tibet, for instance, you don't get buried. That's a no-no. You get exposed until your bones are bleached, and then you get turned into a musical instrument, a skull drum, a thigh bone trumpet, a closely worked skull with fine little silver filigrees on it, and a flip-top lid. And those things become art objects, and those things become important cultural artifacts. And that's the sense in which I have them. The sense that the past and those people who lived in the past that are no longer living are still here, are still with us. They are visible. You can see them, and therefore you can be reminded of them more than if you just had to think about them. My mind, why do I think the thoughts that I think? Why do I live the way I live? Why am I either content on some mornings when I wake up and totally uncontent and discontented by the time I go to sleep? Why am I a contradiction to myself? Why do I not always get along with myself? And this carries over into the aspects of religion. People see this house and they say, "You must be a very religious person." And I always say, "No more than you are," and possibly not even as much. I have many struggles with God. I don't know if God has struggles with me. I don't really hear much feedback. But I do know that deeper thoughts, spiritual thoughts, thoughts involving where we're going, where we came from, what we're supposed to do while we're here, are very much on my mind. And they aren't always happy thoughts. And they aren't always thoughts of agreement, and they're not always agreeable thoughts. They're difficult thoughts. And yet I still think it's better to have those thoughts and to think about those things than to block them out, than to hide them, than to say those are things that we can't look at, because then we're really denying ourselves. We're really denying our own humanity, and we're really denying what it is that we might be here for. Why we were put here. I feel I was put here for something. And if you ask me, I may give you an answer. And if you ask me tomorrow, it may not be the same answer. And if you ask me the day after that, it may be a completely different answer. And if you ask me the day after that, I may say I don't know. I was at NYU. I was a young student. I had just come out of the 4 years in the seminary. I went to the Catholic club. There was a very nice priest there, Andrew O'Reilly. He was a young priest. He had a motorcycle. He used to give me rides on the motorcycle. He was, he was cool. Motorcycle crashed and he died. They had replaced him with Monsignor Searson. He was not cool. He was in his 50s. He didn't understand any of that stuff. I drifted away. Well, I mean, okay, I drifted away, but where am I? Nowhere. What do I need? Somebody. So I found a Catholic worker over on Christie Street, and I helped them in their soup kitchen. And eventually I told them of my problem. I registered on my 18th birthday as a conscientious objector. My brother didn't. I did. I knew I wasn't going to go to the war, or whatever it was they were going to have. I wasn't going to be part of it. And later, when they told me from the Selective Service, you just did this to get out of Vietnam, I said, oh, look at the date that I did that. That's May of 1962. There was no Vietnam then. I said I wasn't going right from the beginning. So I was eventually allowed to speak to Dorothy Day. She was a person who kept to herself. She was a serious person. I was a teenager. I was kind of frivolous. But I had a problem, so I was allowed to speak to her. And I told her my problem was I was a conscientious objector. I didn't know what to do. She said 3 things. You're going to have to change your name, you're going to have to go to Canada, and you're going to have to go to prison. Well, I did 2 out of 3. I changed my name, I went to Canada, I didn't go to prison. I was safe. I had my 4F. Forget about it. Forget about you. No. If it's really important to you, you can't forget about it. So I returned my draft card to the government, and they came from the FBI, and they made 4 visits, and they said, take it back, take it back. I said, oh, no, it's not safe with me. I'll just burn it up. Why don't you keep it down in Washington in a nice little glassine envelope? It'll be safe down there. They didn't like that. The last time they visited, I didn't open the door. I knew they were down there. Instead, I opened the window. I went up the fire escape 2 flights. I knocked on the neighbor's window. I went in. The next thing I knew, well, it took a couple of days, somebody came down from Canada, and they had a passport, and they had my picture on it, and they had his brother's name on it, this guy. And I went over the border at Niagara Falls, and I stayed in Canada. And I worked my way across Canada from where I was, which was in London, Ontario, to Vancouver in British Columbia. And the Canadian people really took me in. You know, it's like that thing I have from Robert Frost in the next room. Home is the place where when you have to go there, they have to take you in. Well, they didn't have to, but they did. So I've never forgotten it. And if there's one place I feel at home in, it's Canada. And I was happy there. And I'm glad that I had the opportunity to do that. And it was because of the anti-war activities that I left, not because of my draft status. I was 4F. They couldn't touch me. They could put me in prison for not having a draft card. You know, what kind of deal was that anyway? You have to carry this card at all times? What country do I live in? I thought I lived in a country where I could be free. I thought I was free. And I was free. I didn't have the card. I felt so much lighter. I felt like I weighed so much less because I didn't have that card in my pocket. I felt that everybody else was with me, that I hadn't abandoned them just because I got my deferment. I helped others. I told them, you don't have to go. Let's make a needle mark. Let's think of something to say. Let's figure some way you don't have to go. I don't care what it is. The important thing is you don't go. There are 10 telephones in the house. They are there because as a senior, I don't want to run for the telephone after hearing it ring, slip, fall, obviously break my hip. They'll come and take me away. They'll put me in a room. They'll close the door. I'll be alone. Nobody will pay any attention to me. The clocks, there are 20 clocks. I have a problem with time. When I was a little boy, my father explained life to me. He said, now if you wake up in the morning and you're dead, you don't have to go to school. But if you wake up in the morning and you're not dead, you have to go to school and you have to be on time. So I've always had a problem with being late. 21 years on the job, I never once called in sick, and I never once was late. I was at work, 6:30 a.m. I had my reports in my hand, and I got up from my desk just as a court officer entered the room. Said, John, there's an emergency. We have to close the building. Get your employees together, and we're all going to leave the building at once. So I put down my reports. I contacted those who were working for me. There were about 5 people. I told them we were leaving, and we then did not use the elevators. We used the stairs. And as I walked down the stairs, one of the judges was walking down next to me. And she said to me, "Well, John, I guess we'll all be back here again tomorrow." I remember her saying that because we weren't. And as I left the building, I thought, well, the express buses are not going to be running to Staten Island, so I'd better take the ferry, not knowing that there were no ferries. As of 8:30, there were no ferries. But I thought I would walk down Broadway. If I had only turned and walked the other way, none of what happened to me would have happened. And that's a pivotal moment with me. And people say, do you regret that you didn't walk the other way? And I say, no, I don't regret that I didn't walk the other way. I'm glad I did what I did. As I walked down Broadway and I saw the buildings on fire, and I thought, gee, that's going to be really hard to put out. And I walked to the next corner of Broadway and John Street, which is 100 feet from the World Trade Center. And somebody nudged me, and they said, look, they're jumping out of the building. And I said, look, oh, my God, they're jumping out of the building. And then the building fell down. And then the cloud came, 60 seconds, and we were all covered in ashes. And it was like nighttime descended, and they pulled the shade down. And as I ran down John Street, which was, away from where everything had happened, I saw that the stores were open. People were banging on the windows, banging on the doors. They wanted to go in those places. Not me. I wanted to get as far away as I could. I wanted to get away from that cloud. It was like a cartoon, and the cloud was moving faster than I was, and I couldn't get away from the cloud. And I ran over to the South Street Seaport, and I had my briefcase in my hand, and I felt my arm tingling, and I felt my hand being numb. And there was a seat, and I put myself in the seat. And that chair was so important to me. It was as important as the electric chair to some people. I was so happy to sit in that chair. I had a moment to recover myself, and I saw a man. I could see him over there, and he was holding masks in his hand. And I got up, and I was covered with dust, and I couldn't talk. I couldn't get a word out. And I went over and I silently held out my hand to him to give me one of the masks. And he said, "Women and children only." So I put my hand down, and I was okay. I didn't need the mask. I probably wouldn't have worn it. So I walked over to the Brooklyn Bridge, and not knowing what else to do, and I saw that there was no one on the Brooklyn Bridge, no cars, there were people, stragglers. They were walking over the bridge, so I walked over the bridge. And I got up on the bridge, and I got to the middle of the bridge, and for some reason, I told myself to look back. And like Lot's wife, I turned around, and I looked back, and I saw the other tower at that moment join its twin forever. And then I knew, and I felt good in knowing, because I didn't know that the first one had fallen down. I thought it had been shot down by a missile or a bomb or something. Now I knew it fell down. And so I walked over the Brooklyn Bridge, but I was so thirsty. I really wanted juice. I wanted a soda pop in the worst way, and there I was on Tillery Street. And what's on Tillery Street? St. James Basilica. And I was standing in front of it. And then I wasn't. And then I was on the ground, and somebody was trying to give me oxygen, and I'd fallen down and had a heart attack. And I was lying on the sidewalk. And I said, "You can't touch me. I'm Christian Science," as they tried to help me, and they got me in a wheelchair. And then they put me in an ambulance. And there were 7 other people in the ambulance, and one of them was a policeman in uniform. And he and I were both looking the same because we were all covered with the dust. My briefcase was covered with the dust. My hands, my arms, my hair, my suit. They took me to Brooklyn Hospital, and I made the wheels of the wheelchair go backward. I said, no, I don't want to go in. I'm Christian Science. But they got me in anyway. And then they wanted me to take off my coat and my shirt and my tie. But I hadn't been working, and I hadn't had a chance to spend my money. So I had my money in cash. I had $6,700 in $100 bills in the pocket of my suit jacket. And I was afraid if I took it off, I'd never see it again, so I wouldn't take it off. But they fought with me, and they got me out of the jacket, the tie, and the shirt, and they gave me a EKG, and they came over and they said, "Mister, you've had a heart attack." And I said, "I want to go home. I want to die at home." And then they asked me for contact information about my mother, about somebody. So I gave them my mother. I thought I gave them my mother's telephone and her address and her. I forgot that she died in 1998. And then I gave them my brother's address over here 3 blocks from my house, and I gave them his telephone number, and I gave them his work number. But I forgot that he'd moved to Princeton, New Jersey in 2000, and that his number at work had changed. But they found him anyway. I told them to be sure now when you call him, tell him that I'm fine. And my brother, when he did come to the hospital with a friend to get me, I said, what'd they tell you? They said that your brother's had a heart attack and you better get here quick. Well, I was glad that they did their best for me, but I couldn't stay in the hospital. And I told them that. They said I was being admitted. And I said, does this mean you're going to put in an IV? And they said, yes. And I said, we shouldn't do this. Someone will get hurt, as I really don't like that kind of thing, needles and IVs and things. So I got my clothes on, I sat by the elevator, and my brother took me home, or actually my brother's friend took me home to his house in Oakwood, and then eventually drove me home, and that night I did stay in my own bed in my own room upstairs. And I did lock the door with a little skeleton key, and I wouldn't come out for a week. I didn't want to participate. And then I did, and then now I take pills for heart and stroke the last 8 years, almost 9 years now. And that's what happened to me on 9/11. After 9/11, they told me I needed to do something to get past all that had happened. So I did. I was going to be in a show that October after 9/11, but they didn't have it that year because of 9/11. So the next year I entered and I had 3 pieces of art. And I was really taken completely by surprise when one of the 3 things I entered won the first prize. So the next year, and after that, I've entered every year, and I've been happy. 7 of the last 8 years I won the first prize, and the 1 year I didn't, I won the second prize. I wrote poems at first. I made collage pieces. I started to glue things together. Assemblages, sort of like toys, found objects, things I find on the street, and I think, I found this, I have to use it in a piece. Somehow it's got to be in there. So I'd start making things and gluing them together and putting them together until I wasn't sure, and I didn't know my way. And, I've been doing it these last 9 years now, and so I've gotten to the point where I sort of know where I want to put things, and I just put them, starting with them, I have a much better idea. Even without knowing where it's going to go, I still know I'm going somewhere. And that's been a help to me. I put things together. I made each of the people at the Last Supper, each of the men, I made into an abstraction. And of course people say, where is Jesus? And of course, in looking around, it's kind of, where is he? Well, of course, he's the one with the crown. And there he is over there. Well then, where's Judas? Well, where would Judas be? Judas would be next to Jesus. So here he is, and he's got the gun. He's holding it, or at least some little totem of Judas. It's the whole figure is actually Judas. The question is Judas a bad figure or a good figure? Of course, I don't know the answer to that any more than you do. So I don't necessarily see him as the bad figure that some people do. I see him as perhaps being someone that Jesus couldn't have done all this without. Maybe he picked the one person that he knew he could rely on. And the fact that they're made out of toys seems to me to be a significant situation, that toys, playthings, can possibly express things that are much more serious than their original purpose. Sometimes the artist doesn't tell everything. And the other piece is one small piece that I thought that I could bring out pretty easily because, and this I just made the other day, I so often think, is it us versus them? So there's a map, and it's got all the states, and if you look very carefully at them, the one state that's not where it should be, and it's hard to see, because I'll have to tell you, is there was no room for Rhode Island, so they didn't put it in there, and instead they put in an extra state down where by Georgia. And so if you didn't look at it, you wouldn't know that they rearranged the states. And each one is marked us or them. And of course, this is them and this is us. and there's a little knife, and of course it was meant to be U.S., but it says us, so of course it goes with the thing too. And I thought the picture of us, it's Jim Carrey and the mask, and the masks that we all wear, and the little things that we have strapped, the heart attack machines we have strapped on our back, and the little things we have to carry with us everywhere we go. A version of maybe one of my canes, and of course there's the authorities, and they've been living the good life. That's why they have a few extra pounds. I think this one of the action figures, it was a wrestler or something, but I always give them different hats, and I always give them different burdens to carry around, because I think it's important that everybody have something that they're carrying with them, as we're all carrying things with us wherever we go. And that's why, and of course the piece of slate that is on seems to me to be a natural thing to be on, like the sidewalk, like the blue slates that are out in front of my house, and I often have them as the basis for things. So that's my art. That I wasn't born by myself, that I had a sibling. I didn't know it at the time. Although I always say I was born second, 7 minutes after my brother, because I wanted to be alone with my mother for a little bit, so I pushed him out. But I don't know what I really felt, and I don't know what really happened. And I don't remember any of it. But I do remember that he was always there, and sat next to me until we went to college. And would have sat next to me then if we'd gone to the same college as our father had wanted for us to go to Columbia together, but I had refused. And I had said, no, I'm not going there. And my father said, of course you're going there. And I said, we both had scholarships, Regent scholarships that paid 50% of the tuition. At Columbia, which was $50 a credit, at NYU, which was $45 a credit. Those were the only two schools we applied to, and we were accepted at both of them. And I said, I'm going to NYU. And my father said, you're not. And I said, I am, and I did. I wanted to know who I was. I was 18 years old. All I heard was the twins think. The twins said, or one of the twins said, but I don't remember which one. I wanted somebody to use my name. I wanted to know if there was a me. He was 7 minutes older. We were always doing what he wanted. He was in charge. I wanted to find out that I was in charge for a change. So that's why I went to NYU, and that's why we didn't continue in college together. It wasn't that we couldn't be friends anymore. We just had to have a period where I could find out about myself, discover who I really was, discover what, if anything, I was all about. And when that happened, we were free to get back together again, and indeed, I talk to him every day. I expect the phone to ring. I expect it'll be him.
What you gonna do?